Greetings and salutations to all of you classic rock lovers out there. It is Friday night, February the 21st, 2025. That means it's time for a brand new episode of your favorite rock and roll podcast, The Fortress of Rock, with me, your humble and gracious host, the Maestro Kevin Crane. This is episode 184 of The Fortress. Well over 3 years into this rock and roll extravaganza, heading to our 4th anniversary. Just a few months away. As always, you know how this works. The format gets tweaked, but it really doesn't change all that much because why mess with perfection? We start off, as always, with news of the world, our tribute to the late, great Freddie Mercury and his band Queen. Let's start off with concert news, touring news. Always a big part of news of the world. Paul Simon. Paul Simon had hearing issues. Of course, we all know Paul Simon is definitely up there in years, as are many of the classic musicians, the rockers that we know and love. But Paul Simon is going back out on the road again. His hearing, I guess, has recovered enough where he can play smaller, more intimate shows. And he is going out on a very, very extensive tour. So whatever happened, time heals all wounds, I guess. Whatever happened, it worked. Because Paul Simon, going out on what he's calling a quiet celebration, that is the name of his 2025 tour, that will run from April all the way through August. And this is why I sound a little bit taken aback, as this from a man who said he was a few years ago done with touring. And we've seen various rock and roll artists overcome hearing issues, whether it's just time healing or technology helping out. But like I said, April through August, 55. Yes, 55 dates in North America for Paul Simon. So this is why I'm saying, whatever happened, whether it was medically induced or a miracle from heaven, if you're religious and you believe in that type of stuff, whatever it was, 55 shows tells me that he's back. Without reservation, without any kind of toning things down or any kind of mellowing out, even at his age. Now, Paul Simon, of course, is kind of mellow, so. But if you get a chance, obviously, get out and see Paul Simon while you can. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nominees. Ugh, excuse me. Thank goodness I had a trash can nearby. Phish. Phish have added some dates to their 2025 tour. Of course, a little while back we reported that Phish was doing a series of West Coast dates to help raise money for the victims of the LA wildfires. Now, they're adding more dates in June and July of 2025. 23 dates in the U.S. for Phish. And not my thing. You guys know this, the jam band thing. I like Dave Matthews, and that's about it. And by the way, on a side note involving Phish, an update an early update on the fan voting for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Phish has almost doubled. They are number one. They have almost doubled the total fan vote of their closest competitor, if you want to call it a competition, which would be Billy Idol. So the jam band freaks out there are rejoicing, and they are turning out in massive numbers every day to vote for Phish. Ugh. Now, on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, we go from Phish for the far left hippy dippy crowd. Now we go to the right for the hardcore classic rock and rollers. Ted Nugent, the Nuge, has got a limited slate of 2025 tour dates he has just announced. Now, he said he was pretty much calling it quits when it came to full-blown tours, but he said as long as I can keep close to home base, which is Michigan and Texas, those are where he has residences, where he has homes where he can stay relatively close to home. He basically has been quoted as saying that staying in hotels is like staying in jail. So as long as he is within close distance, close range of his home in Michigan or his home in Texas, he will continue to perform. So what we've got for Ted Nugent in 2025 so far, 6 dates in April and May in, yes, Texas, and I believe one in Arkansas, and then a couple dates in Michigan in August. So there you go. Ted's going to do things his own way, and in a way, I admire him for it. If you can do it this way, go for it. I'm not a big traveling guy, so I completely understand where he's coming from. And by the way, did I mention it's an absolute travesty that Ted Nugent, not only is he not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, not even getting close to being nominated, most likely because of his politics, but Phish is destroying everybody else in the fan vote. What an upside down, topsy-turvy rock and roll world we live in. There is a new festival that has been announced, the Summer of '99 Festival. This will take place July the 18th and the 19th at Alpine Valley, which is in East Troy, Wisconsin, kind of situated between Milwaukee and Chicago. Obviously 2 days. You're going to have your 2 headliners are going to be Nickelback and Creed. I'm not going to split the roster up for you. You can go out there and look if you're interested and see which bands are playing which days. But some of the bands that will be partaking of the Summer of '99 Festival include live, Three Doors Down, Mammoth WVH, which I find a great but odd choice considering that all these other bands seem like they would have been somewhat relevant in 1999, whereas Wolfgang Van Halen wasn't even in Van Halen yet, let alone having started Mammoth WVH. Then we have Daughtry, Seven Dust, among many other bands. Now, a few weeks ago, we talked about the Back to the Beginning show, which is taking place July the 5th in Birmingham, England. And this, of course, is going to be the final appearance of Ozzy Osbourne, supposedly, where he has now come out and said he will play on a limited scale, a limited basis with Black Sabbath. And that, of course, is the big drawing point, is that you're getting Black Sabbath all back together again. But it does sound like Ozzy Osbourne is going to be limited in how much he performs and plays with Black Sabbath. But we also talked about some of the other bands that are playing, and there have been some big guns added to the slate. And when I say guns, I mean guns. Guns N' Roses will now be performing at Back to the Beginning. Also announced, Tool will be there, and one of my personal favorites, Rival Sons. Now, that's another one where I believe Mammoth WVH, or at least Wolfgang Van Halen, will be there, along with Sammy Hagar. We talked about that. Metallica, of course, was mentioned, among many, many other heavy, heavy hard rock bands. And again, we've talked about this over the last few years. Sometimes it's cheaper to just buy a ticket, fly overseas, and see a show than it is to try to buy tickets here in America. So maybe that's something for you guys to think about when it comes to the historic. I will call it historic because, again, with the relevance of Black Sabbath, the historic Back to the Beginning show, once again, July the 5th in Birmingham over in the UK. So that's going to pretty much do it for concert news. Although, once we get to breakdown, I will have a little bit of an addendum to the concert news. You'll have to stay tuned for that. Now, of course, with all of our classic rockers getting older, there's always, it seems like, health updates. And they're usually not very good. We have one passing in the world of rock and roll. Rick Buckler, drummer for The Jam, has passed away. Now, The Jam didn't really hit it big in America. Much, much more popular over the pond. The one song, of course, from The Jam that I know is A Town Called Malice. MTV tried their best to promote them, but again, they just never, ever took off here in America. Now, a band that did succeed here in America, another band that should be getting much more consideration for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame than what they are getting, is Kansas. And Kansas is still out there, 50 years in? I think it's their 50-year anniversary, roughly, that they're on tour for right now. Give or take a year or two. Now, most of the original members, the classic lineup, are gone, retired. But for a while, now Steve Walsh is the voice most of us know as the classic frontman, the classic vocalist for Kansas. He's been gone, as I said, for a while. And Ronnie Platt has stepped up admirably, and he has been the lead singer for Kansas now for quite a while. Unfortunately, Ronnie Platt has been diagnosed with thyroid cancer. Kansas has had to cancel a couple shows and reschedule a few more, but the prognosis is very, very good. There's a 99% recovery rate, survival rate from thyroid cancer. He will have to have his thyroid gland taken out, but otherwise, Kansas thinks they will still be able to fulfill most, if not all, of their remaining concert commitments in 2025. Now, we're still dealing with, honestly, a lack of new music. I do have a little bit of good news on that front. However, first up, I don't know if you call this a new album. And I'm not a huge Santana fan. So you Santana fans out there can do the digging. You can find out if this is really actually a new album or this is some kind of a B-sides compilation, lost tracks, whatever it might be. But Carlos Santana has announced, as I said, I will put it in air quotes, a new Santana album called Sentient, which is coming out March the 28th. Now, the description that I read, and I'm not trying to be a jerk here. Again, I said I'm not. There are some Santana songs that I love. So we're not putting Santana down there with Eric Clapton and Bob Dylan on the Maestro scale of greatness versus overrated hacks. That probably ticks off a lot of people for me to imply that Bob Dylan and Eric Clapton are hacks. That's okay. It's what I'm here for. But Santana, this new album, Sentient, it sounds like what he's doing is he's putting together bits and pieces of old alternate mixes, alternate versions of old collaborations that he's done in the past. Now, the official description says this is basically new and previously released songs and collaborations. So there you go. So if you want to get out there and read about the songs, the tracks that are making up this new album, again, air quotes, new album from Santana, Sentient, by all means, have at it. It's not going to be something I'm really going to explore or dive into. But sometimes I just pass along some of these news tidbits as a public service to you, my faithful listeners. And then last second breaking news, literally an hour before I was ready to sit down and record this episode. Exciting, great news on the new music front. Now, the Counting Crows have not put out a lot of new music in the past decade. Not a lot at all. Now, a few years back, they put out a 4-song EP. Butter Miracle Sweet One, I do believe was the title. And it was great for 4 songs. It was tremendous. Saw them in concert supporting it. Kind of a little weird. You go out on tour to support a 4-song EP. But I think they just wanted to get out there and get out on tour after the whole COVID debacle. Now, news dropping today, Friday, February the 21st, 2025. On May the 9th, we are getting Butter Miracle, The Complete Sweets. Sweets spelled S-W-E-E-T-S. Not sweet like S-U-I-T-E, like the first EP was titled. I don't care how you want to spell it. I'm just glad we're getting new music. I have not seen a release in terms of a track list. We do have the first single, however, which we'll talk more about. in segment 4. But once again, Butter Miracle, the complete suites from Counting Crows. Now this will incorporate the 4 songs from Butter Miracle Suite 1, and then we're getting supposedly a handful of new songs to go along with those 4 previously released tunes. And again, that's out May the 9th. When I have an update in terms of what the entire album is going to look like, I will pass it along to you. That's going to do it for News of the World. But since we were just talking about new music, let's continue to talk about new music. Let's move on from segment 1 to segment 2. Segment 2, of course, is Breakdown. Breakdown is our tribute to the late, great Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Got 2 new songs for you this week, and then some exciting concert news. First song we're going to review this week is the new song from LA Guns. The song is called Taste It. It is the first single from their upcoming new album, Leopard Skin, which I believe is out the first week of April. Now, I will admit, I was not into LA Guns all that much, and I know a lot of people weren't. LA Guns were somewhat popular throughout the U.S., but never really hit it big, never rose to the level of a lot of the hair bands coming out of LA in the 80s, never rose to the popularity level, of course, of, I guess you would say, an offshoot of LA Guns, which, yes, Guns N' Roses. But Tracy Guns, lead guitarist for LA Guns, wanted to do things his own way, and there's nothing wrong with that. He is acknowledged with a little bit of a wink and a nudge. You know, kind of stinks that I bailed on that band and they went on to become arguably the biggest band in the world. But you have to give Tracy Guns credit. He is still creating new music with his band. They are still putting out new albums consistently every few years. So again, the first single off Leopard Skin is Taste It. Now, I personally like this song a lot. But, bear with me here, it's a little bit sleazy, it's a little bit free form. Yes, there is a chorus, but this is a song that basically would harken back to the down and dirty Sunset Strip sounds of the 80s, which of course we all love, right? If you don't love that, I don't understand why you're listening. And thematically, I want to say there's a theme to the song. It is, how do I put this without stepping over the line, because I don't want to make this explicit, because we want the kids to be able to listen as well, to spawn the next generation of rock and roll fans. I will just say it involves matters of carnal knowledge. And I'll leave it at that. I will not get any more detail. But with a title like Taste It, you can probably make an educated guess as to what I'm talking about. The chorus is catchy. Tracy Gunn's guitar work is exceptional on the song. But like I said, again, the vocals aren't as sharp and as structured as you would expect from a more polished 80s type song. This is not Poison. It's not even Motley Crue. This is LA Guns. A little bit sleazier, a little bit less polished than those other bands from the Sunset Strip, but I still like it. I like it a lot. So I fully recommend you get out there and you listen to the new song from LA Guns, Taste It. And then our other new song to review this week is from Bryan Adams. I cannot believe I'm going to review a song from a Canadian artist after they just beat us in the Four Nations face-off. Just kidding. Just kidding. Nothing wrong with Canada that a new election couldn't fix. But Bryan Adams, for Canada, a national treasure. For me, another act, and we seem to be having this theme pop up throughout this particular episode. Bryan Adams, another performer who deserves serious consideration for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And once again, not getting a sniff, not getting a nomination even. No, I will not go on another Rock and Roll Hall of Fame rant. I've said my piece. But let's recap. Bryan Adams, Ted Nugent, Kansas. All right, Bryan Adams' new song, Roll with the Punches, will be the title track from an album that he is going to release at some point in 2025. We don't have any more details other than that, but Roll with the Punches will be the name of the album as well. And this is your typical, this is one of those cliches that I have taken over the years from reading various rock and roll magazines, rock and roll rags, and kind of adapted it and made it my own because I think it's very fitting and very appropriate. And that's where you say this is meat and potatoes rock and roll. Strong, punch you in the face, very appropriate for a song called Roll with the Punches. But this reminds me of old school Bryan Adams when he wasn't lowering himself to writing and recording terrible, awful, sappy, ridiculous power ballads for movies or not for movies, whatever the case was back in the day. That's when I lost a lot of respect for him, is that Robin Hood ballad, everything I do for you. But the problem is that was so popular, he decided, let's make some more of these ridiculously sappy songs. And he damaged his reputation, at least with me, and I know he did with a lot of other people who wanted him to stick with the more serious rock and roll from classic albums like Reckless and Cuts Like a Knife and Into the Fire. So what am I to do with Roll with the Punches? This was, I'll admit, a very tough one for me. I am fully on the fence with this one because, again, it's good to hear him rocking out, but at the same time, it doesn't have that little extra oomph that you need. It doesn't sound like a complete and total original. It almost sounds like Bryan Adams has a bunch of templates. He has his ballad template and he has his rocker template. And he pulled out his rocker template, his cookie cutter, and he just made a typical kind of generic Bryan Adams rockin' song. If you look back again, I mentioned the 3 classic albums from his heyday. I mean, Cuts Like a Knife had an edge to it. Again, no pun intended. But Into the Fire, um, Heat of the Night, all those great songs, those great rockers had a little bit something extra. Roll with the Punches doesn't really have that. So while I would give him an A for effort, I would probably only give him a C plus for execution. So as much as it pains me to do this, I will if you're a Bryan Adams fan, listen to it, of course. Go out and listen to it. But otherwise, if you haven't really listened to him in a long time, and there's plenty of people out there who haven't, I would say just go back and listen to the classic stuff. You're better off delving back into his 80s work. So I can't, overall, I can't recommend it. It's close, really, really close, but I can't recommend it. So I recommend LA Guns. Taste it. Barely, just missing the mark is Bryan Adams' new song, Roll with the Punches. Now, you guys know I've been talking about my scaling back, partially intentionally, partially unintentionally scaling back on the number of concerts that I am going to see this year in 2025. Now, news has broken. I know this is a little Maestro centric for people outside of Indiana, the area where I record, where the Fortress of Rock is. But I have a feeling you guys will be able to, no matter where you are, relate to this story. Now, I've already talked about the Ruoff Music Center outside of Indianapolis, Indiana, which is technically in Noblesville, Indiana. And how, I don't know if they're under new management or what has gone on over the winter here, but they decided to make a ton of changes, all anti-fan. Charging for parking now when there's nowhere else you can park. They're going to charge you to park in their lot, whereas for decades and decades they let you park there for free. Now they're going to charge you $20 ahead of time, months and months ahead of time. When you buy your tickets, you have to pay $20 for a parking pass. And there's nowhere else you can park. So that's number one, strike one. Strike two, no longer are you permitted to bring in your own lawn chair. You have to rent a lawn chair from the facility, from Ruoff Music Center. Otherwise, you're sitting on the ground, sitting on a blanket. Now, news just broke here this past week. The very popular program that has been around for years and years and years at the Ruoff Music Center, the Lawn Pass. I believe they called the group of people who year in and year out buy lawn passes Lawnies. I indulged a few years ago. You guys know this. I reviewed a ton of shows a couple years ago when I had a lawn pass. For 1 year, it was fine, but I'm too old. A younger generation, a younger group of people, it probably works a lot better for them. And even people in their 40s, it works better for them. But it ain't working for anybody anymore because that has been done away with. The lawn pass has been discontinued at the Ruoff Music Center outside of Indianapolis. So that's strike three. And I have not got any shows scheduled for Ruoff this year, and I don't see me going to any shows, partially in protest of this garbage that they're pulling. And I hope I don't want the concert business to fail, but we're getting to a point now where you almost have to root for it to fail so it can reset and start doing things the right way. Because this is all wrong. Gouging the fans even more than what you already are with adult beverages that cost anywhere from $18 to $20, t-shirts that now cost $50. Now you're going to charge for parking when there's nowhere else to park. We're not talking about a downtown metropolitan area. Not allowing fans to bring in their own lawn chairs. God forbid they have to shell out 30, 40 bucks to buy a lawn chair and they just want to try in the long run to save money. Nope. Nope, you're not going to get to do that. And then, no, we don't want to give you a deal where you have to pay $250, $275 and get in to any show you want, but you just have to sit in the lawn. And again, rent a chair from us. Nope, we're not even going to do that anymore. So, that's my update on concert issues in my area. Again, I think a lot of you can relate to this wherever you are, whatever venue that you tend to go to for your shows. And the thing is, the Ruoff Music Center is pretty big. You know, it draws people in from all of Indiana, draws people in from southern Michigan, draws people in from Illinois, Ohio, the Cincinnati area. I don't know about Kentucky, that might be a little far out, but it's a fairly significant venue in the United States when it comes to concert going. Now, the good news is we'll get away from my little rant there. I wanted to give you guys an update with the end of the lawn passes, which again, complete and total garbage. But we have our first show of 2025 scheduled for the Fortress of Rock. So even though we're cutting back, we do have our first show scheduled. Quiet Riot and Aldo Nova. How about that for a double bill? Now, of course, we all know Quiet Riot, that original classic lineup, half of them are dead. Sorry to put it so bluntly, but Kevin Dubrow, of course, lead singer, has passed away. Frankie Banali, drummer, passed away. Guitarist Carlos Cavazzo is working on something else. He's with some other band that's touring right now, and I cannot remember for the life of me which band, what group he's working with. Now, Rudy Sarzo, the bass player, is still with Quiet Riot, and the guys who are in Quiet Riot have at least been in the band for a while. So looking forward to that. I've never seen Quiet Riot in any incarnation before. But Aldo Nova is what I am going for, who I'm going for. The great, underappreciated, underrated Aldo Nova. Just getting to hear Fantasy and Monkey on Your Back is worth the price of admission alone. So I'm going to see them at the Honeywell Center in a town in north central Indiana, Wabash, Indiana. And that will be a midsummer show. I will have, of course, my review of Quiet Riot and Aldo Nova. Hopefully it's not the only show of the summer of 2025, but the way things are going, I don't know. Now, one last little bit of concert news before we move on. I've already signaled Doc Brown And we're going to confirm the news that we hinted at last week about putting him to work a little bit more here in the future. So we got Quiet Riot. We've got Aldo Nova. There is a second show that could possibly happen in terms of the Fortress of Rock and our concert review slate. I do not want to spoil it. I don't want to confirm or deny yet. Once I buy the tickets, that's when I prefer to let you guys know it is on, like Donkey Kong. So right now, we've got the tickets for Quiet Riot and Aldo Nova. That one is confirmed. The second one, or let's put it this way, I have a target date for this show. It is late April of 2025. That's all I will say for now. But a second show might be added here in the coming weeks to our Fortress of Rock 2025 concert agenda. All right, so Doc Brown, he started to go into the garage to fire up the DeLorean so we could go back in time, but now he's sitting there with his hands on his hips glaring at me because he wants to know what I'm talking about when it comes to him doing more work. All right, as we transition from segment 2 to segment 3 here on the Fortress of Rock, I hinted at this. We are going to kind of meld breakdown and I want to go back. I still don't really have an official name for it, but it's going to be a transition between reviewing new music and traveling back in time. We're going to start reviewing old albums from the 70s, the 80s, and the early 90s that I didn't really get a chance to appreciate or listen to as much as I should have, or that we should have collectively. And I've already got a couple albums lined up over the next few weeks. So, next week, we're going to have to head out into the rock and roll time stream a little bit earlier than normal. We're going to do it during breakdown. And then we'll just stay out there for I Want to Go Back, of course, our tribute to the late, great Eddie Money. But next week, I will be going back in time to review Hanoi Rocks, the album Two Steps from the Move. This, of course, was the album that was starting to push Hanoi Rocks to a higher level, more popularity, and then we had the tragedy with Razzle getting killed in the car accident. I use the word accident loosely, with Vince Neil of Motley Crue. I'm not going to go off on a rant about how Vince Neil got away. I won't say murder, but vehicular homicide. And got a slap on the wrist, whereas the rest of us would have been thrown in jail and they would have lost the key. So the tragic story behind Hanoi Rocks, linked to that album, Two Steps from the Move. That will be part of our breakdown segment next week. We're not abandoning any new music that comes out, but since there's less and less of it right now, we're going to start looking into these overlooked albums. Should have been classics. Why weren't they classics? Not going to review big hit albums. That's not what we're doing here. We're going to try to pull out albums that you and I probably overlooked or really didn't give much attention to, that maybe we should have. So next week, in addition to some songs, We'll always have new songs. But in addition to those songs, Doc Brown and I will get into the rock and roll time stream early, and we will review Hanoi Rock's Two Steps from the Move. And as I mentioned, we've got another album or two already slated for this when we need them here in the next month or so. He actually looks happy. He actually said, "Oh, that's not bad. That's not terrible." I think he thought I was going to have him do an engine overhaul on the rock and roll DeLorean or something like that. So now he's in, he's fired it up, he's getting it up to 1.21 gigawatts. I'm heading out to the garage here. So we can do, as I mentioned, I want to go back as we look back at anniversaries of classic album releases, birthdays, and moments in rock and roll history. So as I get myself strapped in here and we start getting up to speed, I will take care of business real quick. First up, you can listen to us in many different places. You obviously have got a preference. You found us somewhere, but you're not locked in. If you want to change, if you want to try something different, if, God forbid, something happens in the coming weeks where your preferred podcast listening platform shuts down, you have options and choices. You can find the Fortress of Rock on Spotify, Pocket Casts, Apple, iHeartRadio, Overcast, Amazon Music, Castbox, Audible, and Good Pods. And then, of course, we do have a Facebook page. No, we're not on Instagram. No, we're not on X. But we are on Facebook. And we do a couple fun things every weekend on our Facebook page. First up, tonight, February the 21st, it's already out there. This episode will drop later on Friday night, but the Weekend Rock Project is already out. The Weekend Rock Project we do every Friday night right around the same time, give or take an hour or two, one way or the other, same time that the new episode of the Fortress of Rock drops. We give you a word, a phrase, an idea, a concept, and you have to come back with a great rock song. Most of the time, it's a song. 90% of the time. But you read what we're putting out there for the Weekend Rock Project, you come back with an answer that fits the bill. This week, as I said, it's already out, so we want your favorite, your best, your greatest rock and roll songs featuring either or and these two words. Hello and goodbye. I was thinking of the word aloha, the Hawaiian word that can mean either hello or goodbye. And so we want your best, your favorite rock songs with hello or goodbye in the title. Yes, I know there's one glaring song out there that somebody's probably already put out. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, double points. So here's an idea. Think of some other songs that have hello and or goodbye in the title. I, of course, started things off. I left the obvious one out there for you kids. I chose Night Ranger's Goodbye. Plenty of songs out there. Plenty of really good songs out there to choose from, as there usually is. Every once in a while, I'll get in the weeds and I'll make it a little harder, but then people complain and I have to go back for the next 2 months and make these things extremely easy and remedial. I'm fine with it as long as you guys are happy. But sometimes I just really want to do something a little more challenging. So there you go. Friday nights, not only do you get a new episode of the Fortress of Rock, but you get the Weekend Rock Project Sunday afternoon. Sunday afternoon, you get New Music Sunday, which is where I will post a video, a link to a YouTube video of a brand new song. Because we got to keep the new music alive. We have got to keep these artists, these performers interested in making new music, and the way to do that is to show them we're listening. On your favorite streaming platform, Spotify or iTunes or wherever it is, or God forbid you're like me, you actually buy the music. But I will always post every Sunday afternoon if there's a real drought when it comes to new music, I'll still find something. But 99% of the time, I will have a new video, a new song for you to listen to check out on New Music Sunday on our Facebook page every Sunday afternoon. And then, of course, all these ideas, all these stories that I come up with, well, it's not just me. The opinions are mine and mine alone. But sometimes the skeleton, the bare bones, the core of these stories come from outside sources. Three main sources for a lot of what you hear, especially in News of the World, and in this segment I want to go back, come from UltimateClassicRock.com, ThisDayInMusic.com, and the Van Halen NewsDesk.com when we have Van Halen news. And that, you know, is very hit and miss. Some weeks we got 20 minutes worth of Van Halen news, and then we'll go a month with nothing. But since Van Halen is the greatest band of all time, we do tend to focus on them a little teeny tiny bit more than everybody else. All right, Doc Brown has given me the signal. We are at speed in the rock and roll time stream. So, let us start off with birthdays this week for February the 21st. Born on this day, February the 21st, 1967. Michael Ward was a guitarist for the Wallflowers from 1995 through 2001. That was right there in their sweet spot, their heyday. Of course, that really pretty much only includes the massive hit album Bringing Down the Horse. I still listen to the Wallflowers. I still have all their albums. But of course, like many other bands, their popularity has kind of eroded over the years. I still think Jakob Dylan is more talented than his father. Blasphemy! But that's just me. That's what makes music great. Everybody is entitled to their own opinion, and you can't say it's wrong. Every song, every album, every movie, every TV show, there is somebody out there, living, dead, across this huge world that we live in, that we live on. It's somebody's favorite, and it's not wrong. There are people out there who think You Light Up My Life by Debbie Boone is the greatest song ever. So there you go, proving my point with the worst song of all time. My opinion only, though. So again, Michael Ward, guitarist for the Wallflowers, born on this day in 1967. Born on this day, February the 21st, 1962, a very, very underappreciated band, very influential when it comes to the grunge movement. The last great era, in my opinion, of rock and roll was the grunge era. Mudhoney didn't get the recognition that Nirvana and Soundgarden got, Pearl Jam, but Mudhoney was very influential in the grunge scene. Born on this day in 1962, Mark Arm, vocalist and guitarist for Mudhoney. Born on this day, February the 21st, 1961, Ranking Roger. Ranking Roger, part of two bands. I don't want to call them one-hit wonders. I prefer to just say that they weren't as popular here in America. So, a hit here, a hit there, never really had the big commercial impact that they could have or should have. So the two bands Ranking Roger was involved with were the English Beat, as they're known in America. Of course, the Brits just call them the Beat. But the English Beat, responsible for a phenomenal song, one of the best songs of the 1980s, Save It for Later. And then, when the English Beat split up, the core members, including Ranking Roger, moved on to General Public, who had the hit song Tenderness. So again, Ranking Roger of General Public and the English Beat, born on this day in 1961. Born on this day, February the 21st, 1951, Vince Welnick, keyboardist for The Tubes. Talk to You Later. She's a beauty. It's okay. I prefer Talk to You Later. Born on this day, February the 21st, 1949, Jerry Harrison from, of course, the Talking Heads. And then finally in birthdays, February the 21st, 1943. One of those guys behind the scenes who was so impactful, so influential. I remember when he started Geffen Records, and they were signing anybody and everybody big. Asia. Well, Guns N' Roses, I believe, was on Geffen, among many, many others. If you were a new band and you were lucky enough to get signed on Geffen, the promotion, the spotlight you got, a little bit bigger, a little bit brighter. Quarter Flash, I believe, is another one of those bands. David Geffen, of course, is who I'm talking about. David Geffen, born on this day in 1943. All right, so let's move on to anniversaries for February the 21st. We'll start off with one, and the second week in a row we're doing this, which just, I don't know why the rock and roll gods want to punish me here in February, but last week, the first anniversary we had was the passing of Doug Fieger of The Knack. One of my all-time favorite bands, vastly underrated. This week, we start off February the 21st, 2019, the day that we lost Peter Tork of the Monkees. The Monkees will always hold a very, very special place in my heart, not only because I remember how much I loved that show growing up on reruns, and I got to watch them get reborn time and time again, and their popularity ebb and flow. But that was the first concert I ever took my daughter to was the Monkees. And it was I believe a year before Davy Jones died that she and I got to see. Now, Michael Nesmith was not with them at that point in time. It was just Mickey Dolenz, Davy Jones, and Peter Tork. But it was such an incredible night, such a special moment for me and my daughter. And thank God she's almost in her mid-20s. Oh my God, how time passes so quickly. But she still loves music, is so passionate about music, and I want to say that I helped with that. I don't want to take credit, but I'll take credit. And so that's why the Monkees are so special to me. The connection that they bring out in me and my daughter, and of course the first concert we ever saw together. So on this day, February the 21st, 2019, we lost the great Peter Tork. This next one's a little bit personal for me, just because I am a collector. You guys know this. I still buy physical music, not vinyl anymore. It's just CDs, or if I buy digital, I will burn a CD. So I have thousands of CDs. Now, keep that in mind. Thousands. Because the story I'm going to tell you here from February the 21st, 2008 is kind of incredible. A U.S. man, I believe it was a man, a U.S. collector, let's put it that way. I don't want to offend anybody. A U.S. collector put a collection of over 3 million. That's where I'm saying. I have thousands. This person had millions of records, singles, and CDs. Put the entire collection, again, we're talking over 3 million total units, on eBay. And I believe somebody in Ireland won the bidding for the collection, paying just over $3 million for the collection. Now, if you do the math, $1 per item doesn't really seem like a lot. But I think what you've got to look at is the enjoyment, the pleasure that the collector got out of it, and then you're just kind of moving on as time goes by, life passes. I can relate. So it might seem like the person got ripped off, only getting roughly $1 per item in this massive collection. But hey, $3 million is $3 million. Just a fun, wild, little story to pass along on this day in 2008. On this day, February the 21st, 1982, famous DJ Murray the K passed away. And Murray the K, some might dispute it, but most experts acknowledge that he was most likely the first DJ here in the U.S. to play a Beatles song on the radio. On this day, February the 21st, 1981, the anthem for the working class, Dolly Parton's 925, was the #1 single in the U.S. on this day in 1981. On this day, February the 21st, 1972, it was very, very rare for Led Zeppelin to release singles. But on this day in 1972, Led Zeppelin released Rock and Roll and Four Sticks as a single in the United States. And then finally, in anniversaries, February the 21st, 1967, Pink Floyd began recording their debut album on this day, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn. On this day, February the 21st, 1967. All right, that's going to do it for I Want to Go Back. Doc Brown slowly bringing us back out of the rock and roll time stream, putting us into the garage here at the Fortress of Rock. Going to pull the drawbridge up over the frozen moat. However, weather as we approach March looking a lot better, temperatures rising, flowers will start blooming, concerts outdoors will begin. We just have to get through a few more weeks, kids. So, the engine cooling down on the rock and roll DeLorean, I am making my way back to the studio. As you know, the fourth and final segment here involves the future. We've looked at present day with News of the World and Breakdown. We've looked at the past with I Want to Go Back. Now it's time to look to the future with Wrap It Up, our tribute to the fabulous Thunderbirds, where we look ahead to what we're going to be discussing in the coming weeks here on the Fortress of Rock. Now, I usually give you a detailed breakdown, episode by episode, over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks of what we're going to do. I am not going to do that this week. And I don't know for the foreseeable future if I'm going to be so structured and rigid. I kind of like flying by the seat of my pants on this now. What I will tell you, I will give you some of the things that are coming up potentially over the next month, but I am not going to lock them in to a specific episode on a specific Friday night. Now, I did tell you that next week we will review the old album. Can I call it a classic? I don't know. But the album from Hanoi Rocks, Two Steps from the Move. That will definitely be in our little melding of Breakdown and I Want to Go Back next week, as we start to travel back in time to look at these older albums that were overlooked and not given enough attention when they were originally released. I might still possibly now go back and watch the Fire Aid concert. I might still go back and watch the Saturday Night Live 50th anniversary concert. Still might review the brand new live album, even though we don't like to do that. Still might review the brand new live album from Dirty Honey, which is now out. Came out today, February the 21st. Mayhem and Revelry Live. One thing I am looking forward to in the coming weeks to review for you. I am not making 100% commitments here. But debuting March the 11th on Paramount Plus, if you have Paramount Plus, I might end up keeping it. I was originally going to dump it. because I pretty much watched all the shows I wanted to. Landman, Tulsa King. Um, I'm debating. Is it worth $8 to keep it for another month so I can watch on March the 11th Heartbreakers Beach Party, the lost classic from Cameron Crowe featuring Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, which we discussed this a while back. I believe it aired late at night one time on MTV and then was kind of lost. Nobody bothered to remember it or dig it up until here recently. So I'm leaning towards keeping Paramount Plus for another month so I can watch Heartbreakers Beach Party, and then if I do, I of course will pass along my review of it to you. Now, songs in the coming weeks that we're going to be reviewing, brand new songs. Now, a couple of these we discussed last week. The Black Moods, a smaller band that we love here on the Fortress of Rock. Brand new song, I Want Your Love. The Black Keys, a band we're not necessarily enamored with. Brand new song from them. It's been out a few weeks now, The Night Before. Then, of course, we mentioned earlier in the podcast the brand new album coming from the Counting Crows. They're going to finish up this whole Butter Miracle thing. Butter Miracle, The Complete Suites, out May the 9th. The first single is out. And I will tell you this, I love it. It's subversive, it's catchy. Spaceman in Tulsa is the first single from Butter Miracle, The Complete Suites. It was real close. I'll give you a little bit of a spoiler here. Really close. Even though it just came out today, I listened to it enough where I almost put it as one of our top songs of the week. It just missed. Just missed. So that should tell you, number one, it's probably going to be at the top of the charts next week, and we will have our review of Spaceman in Tulsa most likely next week. Brand new song from the Counting Crows. Another smaller band that we are very fond of here on the Fortress of Rock is the Cold Stairs. We mentioned we still don't have a definitive time frame for when the album will be released, but they are releasing the Southern Part 2 at some point. Of course, last year they released the Southern. New single, I'm assuming from the Southern Part 2 from the Cold Stairs, is Little More Rope. We'll have that for you in the coming weeks here on the Fortress of Rock. And then, of course, I am a huge Triumph fan. Massive, huge Triumph fan. A shame that band could never really completely overcome their differences and get back together. They did for a couple of concerts over the years, but that's it. Didn't put together any new music. Now, their frontman, their guitarist, Rick Emmett, has occasionally put out some interesting music, some new stuff. We talked a few weeks ago about how he's got a book coming out. And you can buy a limited edition, a very limited edition package with the book and a CD, an all-instrumental CD. They have released, I guess you would say, the first single off the CD, the first song off this CD. Again, instrumental. I've listened to it, though. It's very cool. Rick Emmett, Cowboy and Gaucho Waltz. So look for a review of that in the coming weeks here on the Fortress of Rock. And then finally, of course, our tribute, in a backhanded kind of way, our tribute to the old Billboard music charts. I know I've kind of said that the Billboard charts have been fairly worthless for pretty much the last 25 to 30 years. I'll stick by that, but before that, they meant something. They were a true gauge of what was popular in songs and albums across the country. But since they're worthless now, the Fortress of Rock has taken it upon our shoulders. We've taken up the mantle here. We will bear the burden, bear the weight. We will start ranking the greatest rock songs, the greatest rock album of the week. We've been doing this now for about 13 months. Still going strong. So your number one album this week on the Fortress of Rock, no, it is not Tremonti. As great of an album as that is, and again with the lack of new music, even I can't keep listening to the same album over and over again, week after week after week. Gotta take a break, and I did. I went back a few months back into the fall of 2024, and I listened to Jerry Cantrell, his latest solo album, I Want Blood. He's actually playing a concert here a couple hours away from me. Either he just played it or it's coming up here in the next week. So that got me thinking, hey, let's pull that album out and listen to that again. So your number one album for the week here on the Fortress of Rock is I Want Blood by Jerry Cantrell. Your top songs of the week. Usually it's going to be something we discussed here in Wrap It Up or something we discussed in Breakdown. And once again, no Tremonti. So the stranglehold Tremonti had on our charts over the last month or so has been broken. And of course, I always cheat and I pick two songs. So, first song, we reviewed it earlier in the podcast. Taste It by LA Guns is one of your top songs. And then going back to last week's breakdown segment, People of Substance from Craig Finn, the frontman for the Hold Steady. His new album coming out soon. First single, People of Substance, which slowly growing on me a little bit more every time I listen to it. So your recap here of the Fortress of Rock charts for February the 21st, 2025. Your top album, Jerry Cantrell's I Want Blood. And your top songs, LA Guns' Taste It and People of Substance from Craig Finn. So there you go, kids. Another outstanding, epic episode of The Fortress of Rock is done. It is over. But don't shed any tears. We'll be back in 7 days to do this all over again. And as the weather warms up, the music warms up. We'll get more new stuff coming. Announcements will be pouring in, because we usually get a flood of new music leading into the summer months. That's usually the pattern. A lot of new releases leading into the summer, a lot of new releases leading into Christmas. So have faith. Keep the faith. as John Bon Jovi would say. I am the Maestro Kevin Crane, the Ayatollah of rock and rolla, and you are who you are. Once again, I'll say the weather's going to get better. Things are going to get better. The sun is going to shine. Summer is just around the corner. Take care of yourselves. Be safe. Love the ones you're with. Until we talk again in 7 days, peace out.